Here I have some veal knuckle bones, and I prefer the knuckle over different styles of veal bone because the knuckle contains more collagen, which will break down into gelatin during the simmering process while you're making the stock. And it's that gelatin which will thicken your stock as you reduce it. Now here I'm squirting them and I'm going to rub them down with canola oil. And this is going to allow the heat to transfer to the surface more evenly. Some chefs don't like this step because they say it adds too much extra fat to their stock. But my contention is you have to skim it no matter what, so I add it. Now here I use our wood fire oven to roast the veal bones. It gives them really nice char. And as you can see here, using that laser thermometer, we're about 800 degrees in there depending upon what part you hit. Now you can easily roast these bones in your regular conventional or convection oven at about 450 to 500 degrees Fahrenheit for about 1.5 to 2 hours until they're a nice dark golden brown. But here, as you can see, we have a nice little layer of smoke. It's going to give the bone just a slight smokiness during the roasting process. It's going to also cook them a lot faster. And as you can see here, they're starting to char and caramelize on the top. But you always want to make sure that you're rotating your pan during the cooking process, whether you're using a wood fire oven or a regular oven for even heating purposes. Now once one side gets nice and cooked, the other side is still pretty much untouched, so you want to make sure you rotate those bones around, place them back in your oven, and you're going to continue doing this until they become a nice dark golden brown. Now here I'm brushing them with tomato paste, and the tomato paste is going to help thicken the stock slightly, but also it's going to add a little bit of acidity and sweetness to the stock. And I'm going to place these bones back in my oven just long enough for that tomato paste to darken slightly and to caramelize. And it's also that nice dark caramelization of the tomato paste is going to add a great color and body to my stock. Now I know what you're thinking, oh my god, look at those, they're burnt. No, they're not, they're gorgeous, they're perfect. Just wait until you see the color on this. So you're going to place the bones in a stock pot, and here you want to deglaze your roasting pan. And I'm just putting it over our flat top with a little bit of red wine. And as that red wine comes to a simmer, I'm using a wooden spatula just to scrape off all the nummies. Now all that stuff that's stuck to the pan is going to give your stock a lot of great flavor, but also color as well. So you want to make sure that you don't skip this process. And then once you have it fairly scraped, you're going to pour it into your stock pot right over your bones. Your next step is to prep your mirepoix, which is 2 parts onions, 1 part celery, and 1 part carrots. And you add it at the ratio of 1 part mirepoix to 5 parts bones. And here I'm going to cut up the mirepoix in just a rough cut. I don't peel my onions or my carrots. That's just a personal preference. And the ratios for your mirepoix is completely up to you. This is the classic ratio, but there's no such thing as the mirepoix police. At least they haven't come knocking on my door yet. And since we're making a roasted veal stock, you're going to roast up the mirepoix as well, so it gets nice and dark and caramely, and you're going to add that on top of your bones. Next, you want to cover all your ingredients with cold water, which you classically start with cold water because it forms larger protein aggregates as the stock temperature heats up, making a less cloudy stock. Now, if a cloudy stock isn't an issue for you, because this won't affect your flavor, then you can actually start with warm water. Next, you want to put it over a high flame, bring it to a simmer, and add in some of your aromatics like a bunch of thyme, 1 bunch of parsley, and sometimes they tell you, 1 or 2 bay leaves. No, here's about 5 or 10. I like bay leaves in my stock. Now, when it comes up to a simmer, you can see this beautiful color extraction, and this is literally a couple of minutes into the simmering process, but because of that dark roast on the bones and the tomato paste, I have a beautiful color. Now, once your stock comes to a simmer, it's time to skim off some of that fat and the protein aggregates. Now, notice how my stock is only simmering on one side. That's because I pulled it off the flame to my left, so only the right side is on the flame. And what happens is a sort of a convection heating cycle that lets the stock simmer up the fat and the protein aggregates on the right-hand side. It collects on the left, and it makes it a lot easier for me to skim by dipping the edge of my ladle underneath the protein aggregates and the fat, skimming my stock more efficiently and thoroughly. After the initial skimming process, you're going to let your stock simmer for 8 to 12 hours, which is ideal for a veal stock. And after that simmering process, I like to add a little bit of cold water right on top, and that's going to shock some of the fat molecules that are left behind to come to the top and coalesce, allowing me to do one final skimming before moving it on to the next stage, which is going to be our straining and icing process. After the stock is simmered for 8 to 12 hours, you're going to strain it through what's called a china cap or a large conical strainer, and this is to capture the veal bones and the mirepoix, some of those larger particles. And here I'm just using a pot to help ladle out the stock at first because it's so heavy. We have about easily 20 gallons of stock there. And then I'm going to use a rolling pin or whatever wooden device you have to mash up the mirepoix just to get a full extraction. Next, you're going to go through and pass it through a chinois, which is a fine mesh conical strainer. Now here, notice how I'm tapping the side of the chinois instead of pressing it through with a ladle, and the tapping is going to allow the stock to pass through but keeps you from forcing through all that particulate matter, which is going to give your stock a gritty mouthfeel. After you've strained your stock both through a china cap and a chinois, it's important to place it in an ice bath, so fill your sink with lots of ice and cold water because you want to cool your stock down to below 40 degrees Fahrenheit within 3 to 4 hours, because anything above that is going to allow bacteria to form, which could sour your stock. Now, the final optional step, which is commonly done in professional kitchens and restaurants, is to make what's called a Remiage or a second pulling. So to your cooked veal bones, you're going to add in 1 bunch of parsley, some thyme, and again, this is basically just aromatics, right? And some, black peppercorns are good, some bay leaves, some hot water because the protein aggregates are already formed the first time. And on top of that, you're also going to add some mirepoix. You don't need to roast it. And again, some more hot water. And to this mix, I also like to add a little bit of red wine for both some flavor and some color. And you're going to take this whole mixture, bring it to a simmer, and you're going to skim and simmer for about 4 to 6 hours. Now, this Remiage can be used to start your next stock to add flavor and gelatin, or it can be reduced down to reinforce the stock you just made. Now, personally, I like to use my Remiage to braise more subtle cuts of meat like poultry and pork. Now, for a more detailed audio lecture on the stock making process, including science and technique, check out the Stella Culinary School podcast, episode 2 and 3, or head on over to stellaculinary.com/stock.